Hey, family, and happy Tuesday. Listen, if you are a, let's see, if you have the qualities of an emerging thought leader, but you haven't quite yet developed maybe all of the skill sets, or you're not quite in the emerging leader space, but you desire to be, you're in the right place. We are continuing a series tonight called Emerging Thought Leader. Tonight, we'll be talking about building your personal brand. We'll be right back after the intro. Well, hello and happy Tuesday. Super excited to be back continuing tonight's topic, Emerging Thought Leader series on building a personal brand. And this is a topic that we hear floating around. First of all, thought leader is a common cliche word. Personal and brand together are a cliche term as well. But I like to simplify the language and give you a new way to think about it. And so that's where we're going to spend the bulk of your time tonight. I'm linnitahosten, your podcast host. I am the founder of Vocal Value, and we help emerging leaders to become better communicators, whether that be in their line of work, with their families, or even with themselves, by helping them, build their mindset and their mindset and their skill set so that they can just communicate better. I just literally got back from a Chamber of Commerce event, and I ran up in the studio, turned on all the lights, so I'm a little frazzled. So forgive me for that. But if you're watching live, let me know where are you watching from. You can drop your name and the city that you're watching from. Last week we had someone watching from Kenya in Africa. If you're rejoining us tonight, let us know you're watching from the motherlands. And I'd just love to know. I would love to know. So, building a personal brand. So, let's talk about what that is. A personal brand is basically what people think of you when you're not in the room. What people think of you when you're not in the room, that's your personal brand, whether that be your personal career brand or your personal business brand. What do people think of you? Think of your, I'm always going to refer back to our 3 C's in vocal value. What do they think about your competency? That's your ability to do something exceptionally well, very proficient. What do they say about that? How do they describe it? How have they interacted with your competency? It's also related to how people see you as being confident. How are you displaying that? Your character too, I would add that in there. So a combination of your personal brand, I think it definitely touches on those 3 C's. And so when you are emerging as a thought leader, your personal brand is everything. It's how people attach or associate that thing that you're known for to you. So they know when it's this, it's you. So we know when it's Dr. Eric Thomas, we know that it's hype. We know that it's full of passion. We know that it's casual. We know he coming for your soul. We know that if it's you name somebody who has a really strong personal brand, you have an expectation for what you're going to receive. It's very consistent. And so maybe put me on the cross. Describe my personal brand based on how you experience me every Tuesday. If you've ever experienced me live and in person, what would you say? That would be my personal brand. So I invite you to type that in and let me know, because I need to know if I'm living up to that. What is my personal brand in your own words? How would you describe that? So I've prepared 2 things that I want to share with you today. So there are different types of characters, and they are core tenets of vocal value as well. Different types of identities that relate to your personal brand. There are 3 of them, but tonight I'm only going to touch on 2 for the sake of time. These are things that I actually teach in Stage Power Intensive, which is my in-person public speaking class. And because I'm traveling for the almost the entire month of August, basically on tour in a way, I won't have the opportunity to do the class in July, so I'm gonna push it back to October. But you'll hear more. But anyway, we talk about what I'm going to share with you today. We talk in We talk about that in Stage Power Intensive. So let's just jump in here. All right, so the first V is your visual identity. There's this is what people see. Now, I was in a business program and there was this one guy, his name was Chris the Nerd. He was known for fixing computers. So if you had any issues, you can come bring your hard drive, your laptop. He could fix anything. Every time you saw him, he had glasses on, like nerdy glasses, but he would do them in different colors, like yellow, orange, red, and his hair was always spiked. He always wore a tie, and he had this button called Chris the Nerd. That's his visual identity. And so when we were at like a small business picnic, he was casual at the bottom, but at the top he didn't change. He had his blazer, his lapel with Chris the Nerd, his glasses, his spiked hair. And it made me think of also Janelle Monáe, who is a music artist, and she has a visual identity as well. I don't know if you all are familiar with her story, but she is a her parents in homage to their employment, she decided to dress in white and black to honor her parents who wore uniforms to work. That's her visual identity. So she started off being dressed in like suiting attire, and then over time it evolved to black and white. That's a visual identity when you think of her. So my question to you is, as you are building a personal brand, what is your visual identity? And here's the thing, whatever you choose, it needs to be congruent all the time. So if you choose something really luxe is luxury, short for luxury. If you choose a very, let's say you do a headshot or a photo shoot in your headshots, you're very polished, bright colors, very well, your makeup, whether you're a man or a woman, you need to show up like that. So however you present yourself in your branding, it should be congruent to how you show up in real life. And I always tell people you should look like your photos. So if you have a headshot is outdated, technically, and you don't look like that anymore, that's misinformation. That's misinformation. When you show up, people should be able to say, oh, that is. And this literally happened to me today when I was at the Chamber of Commerce event. There was a guy there. He said, oh, he said, I can't remember your name, but you teach about public speaking. You're on my LinkedIn. That's because I look like how I look in my photos. I look like that in real life. So if you are thinking about branding yourself, think about what can you actually maintain? What is it that you want to maintain? Sometimes we do those visual aesthetics, and that's not how we look on the everyday. Well, it will probably be in your best interest if you're going to be a face of something, and most thought leaders are. They have a face. Their photos, their videos, they are known visibly. Well, there's some exceptions to this, but for the most part, you can identify the person by photo. So your visual identity needs to be congruent to how you show up in real life. Now, one of my in which I ensure that my visual identity is. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties today. Y'all are getting all of the studio images. I was gonna say one of the ways that I ensure my visual identity mirrors me in real life when I am doing my branding photo shoots. And when I'm getting my makeup done, I always tell the makeup artist, I ask them not to do too much that I can't do. So there's a lot of things I can't do. I'm not at the contouring. I don't wear highlight on an every day. And I usually don't wear lashes. So whatever you do to me, don't make it look like how I wouldn't normally look. So I show them photos. This is how I look when I get dressed without your help. And so that helps me be congruent with how I show up in real life. And most people don't do that. They go and they say, I want to look like this, but then in real life, they don't look like that. So start with, what do you want to be comfortable and known by? If you want to be known for sweatsuits, get some custom sweatsuits. What if you got them made? What if you got them personalized? What if you there's a lot of creativity that you have. And last week when I talked about how there's some people that we know, they have a more casual appearance, what I should have said was there are some thought leaders who have um, embraced how they naturally show up every day. So if that's casual to them, then that's casual. But there's levels to being casual too. And if you are unsure of how that looks, I would suggest that you would research some of your favorite thought leaders and look to see if there's a theme in their clothing. Does their appearance, does it resonate with you? And if so, what is it that you like and what can you take away? So that's your visual identity. And again, it should be congruent to how you show up in real life. Otherwise, we're communicating misinformation and we never want to do that. So before we jump into the second one, I want to share these are 3 ways we can work together. You know this, I am a holistic public speaking coach. Holistic meaning mind, spirit, body, and emotions. When I coach on public speaking, we're touching on all of those things, not just the content, because they're all intertwined. So you can hire me to coach you individually. We also offer group coaching if there's a group of people that you want to develop the public speaking skill or communication skills in general. The second piece is that you can bring me in to speak. I mentioned to you that I'll be traveling for the month of August, doing several keynotes as it relates to leadership and communication. And then finally, we can partner on a leadership initiative. If you have an emerging leadership program that you're developing, you have the talent that needs development, but you don't have the talent to facilitate the content or the training, we can not only create it, but we can also facilitate it. And we're actually doing that right now with 2 state agencies. So these are 3 ways that we can work together. Also, at the end of our podcast tonight, I'm going to invite you to come backstage with me. So we'll be backstage. We do a post show for about 15 minutes. Bring your questions from tonight that you have. If there's something that I talked about, you're like, well, I don't know, I just want a little bit more information, come backstage. And you don't need an email address or phone number to join us. It's literally a button. So if you go to vocalvalue.com/emerging thought leader, that's an acronym for that, ETL, you can join me backstage and bring your questions. If there's something that you are wanting to know that you know, maybe you want more answers about. Again, this is after the podcast. You can join me for about 15 minutes backstage at vocalvalue.com/ETL for emerging thought leader. So here's that second one. When you're building your personal brand, you also have a verbal identity. And this is the one that I feel has the greater impact. The visuals are, I would say, it's an add-on. So here are some ways that frame your verbal identity. Last week we talked about being long-winded, and I didn't tell you how to mitigate or work through that. And part of that is speaking in sentences versus speaking until you finish your thought. So if you're known for being long-winded, that's a verbal identity. When people see you and they engage with you, they automatically assume this is going to take a little longer than I likely have time for. That's an identity that you've labeled when you're long-winded. So if you struggle with that, one of the ways to help you is to speak in sentences. Don't worry about finishing your thought. So your thought is, oh my gosh, this weekend was so much. I just had so much to do with my family. And then we had birthday parties and the kids had parties. It was just so much. I was just so overwhelmed. I'm not even sure if I got through if I did everything I was supposed to do. I'm tired. That's you finishing your thought. Finishing your sentence would be, this weekend was a lot. We did some of everything. That's a sentence. Remember, when we're communicating, we're responsible for the recipient having clarity. When you have too many words, it's really hard for people to remember what you said and process it at the same time. So you have to not only slow down, but you got to use fewer words. And so speaking in sentences definitely help you with that. Another part of verbal identity is how the language that we're using to describe the things that we're talking about. The best practice is to speak as if you're speaking to an 8th grader and you desire them to have comprehension. So that means removing industry jargon. Today, I went to the Chamber of Commerce event. Someone stood up and they said, we help disenfranchised individuals. Hold up, what is that? If I'm not familiar with those kinds of terms, over my head, disenfranchised, low income, those who have need, low income, lacking resources. Or if I were 8th grader, I would maybe say, instead of disenfranchised, I may say those who might be struggling with employment, having or struggling to keep and maintain a job, struggling with their income, making low. Well, and then you got to be careful too because you don't want to insult people. So what I would do is use AI. If you are not sure how to break down your industry jargon into eighth grade language, ask an AI tool to do that. So that would be Chat GTP. I know Google has its own as well. But type in, this is what I do. Can you explain this to me in eighth grade language? And look to see what kind of words are being used that you can possibly pick up. Again, if people know you to be someone who speaks in industry jargon, what it does is it dehumanizes what you do. We want to humanize our work. We want people to feel like it's for individuals and it's for we're actually helping people, not just this entity that does the work. And we humanize our work by speaking plainly about it. Another way that affects your verbal identity is when you speak, you share how you feel versus how you want to be received. So, an example of this is let's say you want to be received as, you want people to see you as um, authoritative, but you want them to feel safe. You want them to see you as that. But how you feel, perhaps maybe, I'm not sure if they're respected, so I'm going to apply a little bit more assertiveness, a little bit more firmness when I'm talking to them. I might even be a little bit more direct with body language, like pointing, leaning, crossing my arms, because you feel that if you did those things, that they would receive you. Well, I'll always say do the reverse. We shouldn't speak the way that we feel. We should speak the way we want to be received. Typically, when you're looking for someone to receive you, the first thing is you should be speaking to them respectfully, even if you're unsure if they will acknowledge your authority. So, our job is not to think about what the other person is doing. Our job is to make sure that they have clarity. And when you are presenting or talking or communicating, it's really important that you're thinking about how that individual is perceiving you. And so I feel we should speak the way we want to be received and not the way we feel. So sometimes if we feel unheard, we speak louder. If we feel like you're ignoring us, we elongate the point or repeat ourselves. I think you should speak the way you want to be received the first time. And I mentioned this at the chamber event today. I mentioned how, I was not always the person who could command a room. I became that person because public speaking is not a personality trait. It's a skill. It's a super skill actually. It's something that over time you can actually obtain. And I encourage you, if any of these things were, if you're like, man, that's definitely something I struggle with, great. Now that you have awareness about it, let's work to change or improve the skill. There's two other components I want to teach you about your verbal identity. So, your verbal identity is also related to what people hear when they hear you speaking. And let me break that down to you. They hear your pitch. So I naturally have a high pitched voice. I have trained myself to speak from my diaphragm, which is a lower tone of a voice, so that people can sustain listening to me for a longer period of time. But technically, my voice is really like this. I have a really high, when I get, you hear that, the difference? And I have not tried, but I have learned, I'm just having a whole bunch of tech issues today. I have learned the importance of not allowing my high pitched voice to, hold on, guys. Hold on, let's see. Looks like our camera is disabled. Let's see if we can fix it. Hold on. The funny part is, I typically sometimes have on pajama pants, but today I actually had on pants. I'm really glad because you guys would have saw my pajamas. But what I was saying was that your verbal identity is a combination of your pitch, your intonation, the volume that you're speaking in, and your pace. And let me define those terms. So your pitch is whether you're speaking, and some people have a really low voice like this, like a Barry White, like a raspy. Your intonation is the pattern of your pitch. And this is what I find, this is where I find it difficult to listen to individuals. So some people have a lot of, they're placing a lot of unnecessary emphasis on words that don't necessarily have a meaning. So we say things like, oh my goodness, it's so good to see you. How are you doing? Oh, wow. I just feel like it's so important that we always, so the emphasis, they're unconsciously placing emphasis on words that it does not require that. A very powerful presenter who has a very conscientious verbal identity, they understand that the emphasis that they're putting on words, that's where you want an individual to focus. And so if I really want you to focus on something, then I'll slow down and maybe elongate that word. But not every word I want you to pay attention to. But when I want you to pay attention to that, then that's where you would place that inflection. And so your intonation is how you go about doing that. You can also refer to it as your vocal variety. When you start listening to this, you'll develop a sensitivity of hearing. And to be honest, we should always be listening to ourselves as we speak. We should be listening to listen to our pitch, that intonation. And here's the third piece of that is your volume. And I mentioned today in the room that I was in, if there's a microphone in the room, you should use it because the microphone is there to amplify sound. And it's so that people are not straining to hear you. Even if you feel like you have a powerful, strong voice, it's just etiquette to take the microphone. If someone is hearing impaired and you chose to not use the microphone because usually people don't use the microphone because they don't want to hear themselves amplified in the sound. But you have to learn how to get comfortable listening to your voice through amplified sound. So we should be listening to our volume. Today was when I was at the Chamber of Commerce event, and the sound system that they had, it wasn't the best. So I knew when I grabbed the microphone, I'd have to be really close to it like this when I held it in my hand. So I was going to have to be really close like this. So there's small things that you can do when you're in those environments to kind of control the volume. If people cannot hear you, that says a lot about your confidence. If you're speaking lowly, to me, that's saying, I'm okay if people don't hear what I have to say. When you want to be heard, you're going to add some volume to that. So think about that. If your goal is to be seen as a thought leader or someone whom is credible in your industry, how you come across or the perception that you are attempting to convey, it matters. And that has a verbal identity through your volume. And here's the last one is pace. It's so easy when you're nervous to just start speaking really fast. And what that conveys to most people is obviously a level of nervousness, because a person who is not nervous is not speaking fast. They're going to take that time. They're going to set that thing up. Okay. They're going to take their time. Think about comedians. And I think they are a really good example of what it means to be a powerful presenter. Think about that. Do you hear them speaking lowly and you can't make out their jokes? Do you hear them speaking so fast you didn't understand what they were saying? And do you hear them speaking in the same tone the entire time of their stand-up? Some of them do, like Dave Chappelle, but he gets a pass. And you notice that when they're doing their skits, their tones change when they're mimicking other voices. They are a very good example of powerful presenters who have a verbal identity. And you know why they have to do that? Because that's the only That's the only stimulant that they have as a performer. They don't have backup dancers, they don't have motion graphics. It's literally their voice entertaining you for usually minimum 60 minutes, just their voice. So that goes to show you that there's some intentionality about how they're showing up verbally. And we should almost mimic that same intentionality if we are desiring to build a personal brand and want to be conscientious about our verbal identity. What do you think about that? What do you think about that correlation between comedians and presenters? Hey, Bryce. So good to see you here. Thank you for joining us. Bryce said, I stutter when I'm nervous. Yup. My partner Leonard does too. He absolutely yep. And I would say to you, because you know that, slowing down, like not being in a hurry to maybe answer someone right away or to provide a response, like really think through your response. And you can say this, and I've said this on other podcasts. If it's your time to speak or answer a question, you can say, give me a moment so I can put that together. Give me a moment to get my thoughts together. Or let me think about that. What typically happens is there is a silence there that we're not comfortable with. So we are attempting to fill that silence with the pressure of coming up with words. And we say things like, well, and so to avoid all of that, give yourself grace to think through your thoughts first. And what if you notice, there are not a lot of ums and ahs in my speaking. Only because I have gotten really comfortable with silence. It doesn't bother me. It's not something that I'm afraid of. So when it's silent, it's just silent. But I would definitely encourage you to give yourself time to think through your thoughts before you share them. And you can prepare your listener like, okay, just give me a second. Let me think through that. And slowing down is definitely helpful. So we talked about your visual identity and your verbal identity. There's a third one that we won't talk through tonight because we won't have the time to, but that's your nonverbal identity too. So as you are being observed when you are communicating as a thought leader, your ability to make eye contact, what your facial expressions are doing, what your feet and hands are doing to complement what you're doing as you're speaking, those are what we call your nonverbal identities. And we don't have time to go through that. But what questions do you have? What questions do you have? Drop them in. Bryce said, sometimes the awkward pause is good. Yes, I agree. And it gives your audience, when we pause, we're giving the audience or our listeners a chance to process what we've shared. So again, when we are not speaking in sentences, the person whom is listening to us has to work twice as hard to understand what we're trying to convey. When we slow down, we give them, our listener, which should be the focus, we give them a chance to process what we're communicating. And so slowing down, while to us it does feel odd, uncomfortable, remember, I always say communication is not about us. It's about our listener, their perception and their needs and being able to meet them. All right, so I mentioned this earlier. There are 3 ways we can work together. If you've been joining me on my weekly podcast, the first way is we can partner if you need a public speaking coach. I do offer that in one-on-one and also in group coaching. The second way is you can bring me in to speak. I have a range of keynote topics related to leadership development and also communication skills. And then the final one is if you are a part of an organization who has an emerging leadership program or you desire to create one, we can partner on that. So that, let's say you have a cohort of people, they need development, but you don't have the time or the interest in developing a curriculum or the people to facilitate it, we can do that for you. And we're actually doing that now, that latter part, we're doing that now with the state agency, partnering with them to do that on the youth development side. And so those are 3 ways we can work together if you were interested. And finally, today is part 2 of the Emerging Thought Leader series. Next week, we'll continue on with part 3, and we'll talk about the cost of ineffective communication. Like, as a result of not, I would say, working to improve our communication when it's ineffective, what is it costing us? We'll talk about those things next week because I want you to develop an awareness. If it's your goal to be seen as a thought leader in a thing or an area or an expertise, I want you to have the awareness of the value of your communication skills. They are invaluable. They are speaking for you in rooms when you're not even there. So, as we're talking about building a personal brand, your verbal identity is everything, as well as your visual identity. But think about it: if we focus on the visual identity, meaning our online presence, which you should do as well. But when we say colors, our logo, and our website, those are our visual branding elements. Well, what happens when you get into a room in real life? What happens when you finally get in front of your ideal client or audience? There should be a continuation of how you appear online in real life. The two should be congruent. And so if it's your desire to emerge as a thought leader, we gotta be building that personal brand. Hey Waleed. Waleed said, how do you deal with the initial anxiety when beginning a speech? Oh my goodness. Great question. So this actually happened to me today. By the way, this camera just doesn't want a good show today. I still get nervous. And so what I did today was I had to remind myself that you're capable and competent. I literally had that conversation with myself today. You're capable and competent. I was at a Baltimore City Chamber of Commerce event. We were doing business showcases. I signed up for that, by the way. So I knew it was coming, meaning I would have a chance to stand in front of a group of people and share about vocal value. And I was nervous. That's what you're referring to, that initial anxiety, feeling of anxiety. So I had to remind myself, Linnita, this is what you do. So why are you nervous? And what comes out is going to be out of it is going to be what you've been doing all this time. You're a thought leader in what? So I think that affirming piece is definitely important. On a more practical side, deep breathing is something that I've practiced too. Earlier this year when I did my TED Talk, I was about to jump out of my body. I was so nervous. I haven't been that nervous in a long time. And so I did deep breathing. So that would look like inhaling I do 8, inhaling for 8, holding for 8, exhaling through your mouth for 8, doing that 4 cycles. What that's going to do is activate your vagus system. It's going to slow down your heart rate and physically to your body. This is a great practical way to deal with those anxious feelings. Remember, I told you I'm a holistic speaking coach. So that whole emotional and physical element, this is a really good example of how I coach people through that. So you can do deep breathing. And on the more practical side, one of the ways to combat anxiousness is to be prepared. Preparedness is super undervalued. I didn't prepare for the chamber event today, but I guarantee you, if I would have sat down, written out what I was going to share, I only had 2 minutes. That would have increased my confidence. That nervousness or anxiousness that I felt, it probably wouldn't have been there as loudly as it was. So if you are anticipating that someone's going to call on you and you're already in a space, start writing down what you're going to say. Getting your thoughts out onto the paper. If you know in advance, start preparing in advance. Preparation is definitely something that I feel definitely attributes to subsiding that anxiousness. The last piece I would say, Waleed, and you're absolutely welcome, thank you for asking that question, is nervousness is natural. When that goes away, I like to say your humility has gone away too. So it's a natural response to us wanting to do a great job. So I hope that you don't run from it, that you definitely run towards it. And those butterflies turn into, like, when you do a good job, those butterflies turn into really strong pat on the backs. So thank you for asking that question. And thank you guys for bearing with our tech issues that we had today. And I figured out what the issue was. I had an extra cord plugged in, so it made it a little challenging. Okay, so we are definitely over our time. I like to keep the episodes under 20 minutes because I want y'all to come back. So, again, next Tuesday, we'll be jumping into the cost of ineffective communication. I hope that you will join us there. Also, I wanted to remind you that after the podcast, you can join me backstage for 15 minutes. Bring any question that you have. Maybe you don't have a question. Maybe you just want to say hi or share a comment, a takeaway that you learned today. You can join me backstage at vocalvalue.com/ETL, and that stands for Emerging Thought Leader. That's the series that we're in. vocalvalue.com/emerging thought leader. You can join me there. I'll be back there for about 15 minutes post show. And tell me what you learned today. What was your takeaway if you are watching? What did you learn today outside of how to push through when your technology isn't functioning? What did you learn today? And as you are sharing that, I'll close by sharing this. At the chamber event today, when I opened up, and if you're networking, I encourage you to do this. Everyone always starts with their name and what they do. And if you're in an environment where you are introducing your personal brand to a group of people and there are several people going, watch what they're doing and try your best not to do that. So if everyone is doing this, change it up. One guy today started with something about his kids. I can't remember what he said, but everyone started laughing. Then we're anticipating, well, what are you going to say next? I started with a question. I asked him, how many of you absolutely enjoy public speaking? And a lady in the back said, I hate it. And I said, yep, I used to too, before I even introduced myself. So that's something to consider if you're out networking. Think of a way, contrary to what other people will do, it definitely helps you stand out. Well, I hope you will join me backstage. Again, vocalvalue.com /ETL for Emerging Thought Leader. I'll see you next Tuesday, Eastern Standard Time, for us to continue on the series. And I love you. There's absolutely nothing you could do about it. Bye.